Welcome everyone to our webinar with Care Answered and Pfeifer Law. We're going to talk about community Medicaid and how to access it and the changes that are coming about and why to access it now. First up will be Michael Pfeifer, who is a wonderful colleague and friend and an excellent elder law attorney. And he's going to speak to us about the financial eligibility of Medicaid. I know for certain he is a ever learner because these policies change and laws change quickly, and he is on top of it, getting people the care and planning that they need. So Michael, why don't you start us off?
Thank you very much, Nicole. Nicole and I work together quite a bit on Medicaid applications. I do the financial end of things and she helps people get the services. So we work together very well, and it's a pleasure to be able to present with her. Just a little bit about myself. I think most of you people, I'm looking at the names here, most of you people know who I am. I practice elder law and estate planning. As you can tell from the gray hair, I've been doing it for a couple of years. And I'm a former chair of the Elder Law Committee in Nassau County at the Nassau County Bar Association. So what we're going to do today is we're going to discuss the new Medicaid laws as pertaining to community Medicaid. And there are big changes that happened that are going to, unfortunately, adversely affect our clients. So first of all, this is only a discussion of New York law, all right? Medicaid is a federal program, but it's administered individually by each state. And each state has its own rules. And in fact, in New York State, from county to county, you will find differences in the way in which Medicaid is administered. So we have to know not only what the rules are in the state, but each county as well. So why is this topic important? The reason why it's important is because for most middle-class people, if they need Medicaid home care for things such as help with bathing, dressing, and so on and so forth, it's very expensive. I was assisting a client with home care up until recently, and I was paying over $120,000 a year out of her money, of course, but $120,000 a year for 24/7 care. So it's very expensive. Most middle-class people are not going to be able to afford that amount. And so we have to look at Medicaid and what's going to happen with that. Some people think that Medicare will cover my home care, but it doesn't. Medicare covers such things as doctors and hospitals and things like that. It does not cover things that we're talking about right now, which involve long-term care. So long-term care deals with activities of daily living, otherwise known as ADLs. And what are ADLs? It's bathing, dressing, walking, stuff like that. If you need help with those activities, Medicare is going to provide very little assistance for you. So we're talking about Medicaid. Okay. Since February 8, 2006, there has been a 5-year look-back period for nursing home care. So most people are familiar with that. Up until this time, there has been no look-back period for home care. That's something new. And as of October 1st, or up to 90 days thereafter, if the commissioner of the Department of Health decides to extend the time because we're still dealing with coronavirus, there will now be for home care and other community Medicaid services a 30-month or 2.5-year look-back period. So what does that mean? What that means, if you apply for home care, what's going to happen is the Medicaid agency is going to want to examine 2.5 years of your financial information. And if they discover that within that 2.5 years, you made a transfer to somebody else or a gift to somebody else, what they're going to do is they're going to penalize you, which means that you're not going to be eligible for Medicaid. Now, the way in which they measure it is the same whether you're institutionalized in a nursing home or whether you're seeking community Medicaid. And what they're going to do is they're going to take the fair market value of the assets that you have transferred. They're going to divide that by the average cost of a nursing home in your area, the average monthly cost, and they're going to come up with a number. And that number is going to be the number of months that you will not qualify for Medicaid. So let me give you an example. I'm going to make up numbers here to make the math easy. Okay, so let's say you transferred $100,000. And let's say in your area, the average cost of a nursing home is $10,000 a month. So what if it's discovered that you transferred this $100,000 within 2.5 years, what's going to happen is the Department of Social Services is going to penalize you by dividing the $10,000 average cost of a nursing home into the $100,000 that you transferred, and they're going to come up with a penalty of 10 months. And during those 10 months, you will not be eligible for Medicaid. The actual figures for the actual average cost of a nursing home on Long Island is $13,407, in case you were interested in that. Now, when we talk about Medicaid, the type of services that are now going to have a look-back period for the 2.5 years, we're talking about long-term care services, and that would include such things as home health care services, private nursing duty services, personal care services, and assisted living services and other similar services. It does not include, some people get Medicaid because they're impoverished and they need it for doctors and nurses service, physical therapy and stuff like that. That will not cause a 2.5 year look back period. Okay, now as some of you may know, when we're dealing with nursing home Medicaid, there are some exempt transfers that you can make to other people that will not be counted against you and will not cause a penalty. Well, we expect that we will also be able to do exempt transfers with regard to community Medicaid as well. Now, first, with respect to the house, you can transfer your house to your spouse, to a certified blind or disabled child, to a caretaker child, to a sibling with an equity interest in the home, or a child who's under the age of 21. Now, what's interesting about this is when you go into the nursing home, assuming that you don't have a spouse living in your home or some other person that would make your home exempt, when you go into the nursing home, now your house is no longer exempt. However, when you are receiving community Medicaid, your house is exempt. Now, if you were to go into the nursing home and transfer your house, let's say to your brother or your sister or your friend, in other words, to somebody who the transfer would not be exempt, now you're going to have a penalty. However, what we're curious about, we don't know the answer to this yet, but it may be the case that you would not be penalized in the home care setting for transferring your home. Why is that? Because as long as you live in the home, it's an exempt asset. And generally speaking, when you transfer exempt assets, they are not, there's no penalty. Now, with regard to institutional care, there is a penalty because the law specifies that there's a penalty with regard to your home. So they carve out that exception. But there is no such exception that we know of in the law at least as we interpret it right now, for home care. So it'll be interesting to see. And there's a lot of things that are going to happen with this new law that we don't know about. We do need more guidance from the Department of Health. And of course, there'll be litigation, no doubt, because, as you can imagine, elder law attorneys and the Department of Health don't always agree on how the law should be interpreted. And so you're going to see some litigation. Okay, so going on with my outline here. Okay, so the next question might be, well, is there anything that we can do? Let's say within, you need Medicaid, whether it's nursing home Medicaid or community Medicaid. Is there anything that we can do, any planning that we can engage in? And the answer is yes. With regard to nursing home care, for many, many years, we've been using promissory notes to help people preserve assets. So I'm not going to go into all the nitty-gritty of how that works, but I do just want you to understand that there are things that we can do, even if you're on the doorstep of community Medicaid or needing nursing home Medicaid. There are things that we can do to preserve substantial assets. One of the other things that they're eliminating is used to be able to get personal needs from home care. Now you can't get that anymore as of October 1st or whenever the beginning date the date begins. We have a lot of concerns about this statute, one of which is now that we have the 2.5-year look back period, the concern is that it's going to take a lot more time for Medicaid applications to be decided. Right now, it's already taking between 3 to 4 months minimum to get people services from the time we file the Medicaid applications until they can actually have the services begin. And, we're very concerned that this is going to cause more problems. Okay, so what should you do now? What are we recommending in view of these new laws that you consider? And one of the things we are suggesting is that you consider a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. Medicaid Asset Protection Trust, you put your assets into the trust and then they're protected for Medicaid purposes. We recommend that you do that now before October 1st because we're recommending that you do it now because now you're going to be subject to the 2.5 years of Medicaid look back. And so a lot of times we had in the past people say, well, I'll never go into the nursing home, so I don't need a Medicaid Asset Protection Trust. Well, now you may need it for the circumstance of home care as well. So it's a good thing to get it done. The other thing is that we think that you should apply for home care now if you think you might need it. And the reason why we're suggesting that is because the standards, I already mentioned there's a 2.5 year look back period. Nicole's going to talk about how things are going to get more strict with regard to qualifying for services. So you're not only going to have stricter financial standards, but you may not get care because the level of care that you need is not going to meet the new thresholds. So now's the time to apply for Medicaid before it's too late. I just want to mention, going back to the financial standards, we believe that once you apply for Medicaid, let's say you apply before October 1st, before the new look back period comes in, we believe that you'll be grandfathered in. We can't guarantee that, but we believe that you probably will be, and that's why we suggest that, if you're going to apply for Medicaid, now's the time to do it. You don't have to have an aide come into your house at this time. You can apply for Medicaid, get it. I know a lot of people are a little concerned because they don't want people coming into their houses. So you could apply for Medicaid, get it, and then hold off until you're ready to accept somebody into your home you feel more comfortable. Also, my office, and I'm sure Nicole does the same thing. We can operate by telephone conferences, video conferences, so we can talk to you about your legal needs without having to set up an in-person meeting. And also there are telephone conferences and video conferences for determining when the managed care companies determine what services that you need. So we're all aware that we need to be safe. We're all aware that we need to put procedures into place, and that's what we're going to do. So in any event, I'd like to now turn it over to Nicole and have her give us her wisdom.
Thank you so much, Michael. That was very informative. I have some questions here in the chat. Adam asked, what do you mean by personal needs that are no longer being covered by Medicaid?
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't think I was very clear on that. You used to be able to get housekeeping services for Medicaid. In fact, you still can today. So if you only needed help with like cooking or cleaning your home, things of that nature, those services are presently available. And I believe they'll be grandfathered in for people who are receiving them. However, as of October 1st, you will no longer be able to receive those services. So thank you for helping me to clarify that, Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, so that's to be medically eligible, medically approved for community Medicaid. One of the levels would include light housekeeping and light
Right.
cooking. Now that will not be considered to be eligible.
That's correct.
The next question is, has anything, from Donna, has anything changed with regard to what is considered irrevocable trust as well as funeral pre-planning that is allowable by Medicaid?
The good news is that no, nothing has changed there. The only difference is that if we were to set up a trust for you in the past, well, even in the present, if you needed home care, we could set up an irrevocable trust for you and then qualify you for Medicaid relatively quickly. Now with the 2.5-year look back period, of course, if we set up the trust within the 2.5 years, we're going to have to, in essence, void the trust, give the monies back, and try some different planning, perhaps. So that's the difference. With regard to funeral planning, nothing has changed there. You can still set up a pre-need funeral, and we would highly recommend that you do that if you're applying for Medicaid, because it's an exempt resource. So that's something that you really want to do.
Thank you. Laura has the question, if you apply now for Medicaid, how long down the road can it be utilized if you don't need it as of now? So we're talking about community Medicaid and applying for it.
I believe the period is a year, and if you don't utilize it within a year, I believe that you'll have to reapply.
And just to add to that, when you're talking about applying financially, that's one thing. When you're approved medically, that first approval that comes from the state lasts 75 days. So you would need to, if you thought you needed it and then changed your mind, you'd need to re-up that for when you needed the actual services.
Right, Nicole, and I just wanted to add to my previous answer that I believe right now the Department of Social Services, because they do realize that people don't want necessarily an aide coming into their house, they are allowing people to apply and not accept services at this time. That will probably extend the period of time that you have to accept services.
That's a really good point. Pam asked, is there any discussion about the penalty period being phased in the way that was done when the 36-month look back to 60-month look back for institutional Medicaid? So when institutional Medicaid made the change from a 36-month look back to a 60-month look back, it was phased in. Is there any talk about that?
Okay, that's an excellent question. And the answer is it's not going to be phased in. Once we hit the October 1st or whenever it actually becomes effective, that's it. There is no phasing in of it like back in 2006 when we had the changes to the institutional Medicaid.
Okay. You all have great questions. Thank you. Okay, that's all the questions for now for you, Michael. But again, if you come up with some, put it in the chat because Michael will be here with us.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Great questions. I always appreciate great questions.
Absolutely. Oh, there's one more question that just came in. Michael, do you do the Medicaid application?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for that question.
Okay. So again, probably many of you know me as well, but my name is Nicole Christensen. I'm the CEO and founder of Care Answered. We provide healthcare coordination and patient advocacy, navigating people through the healthcare system. When there's a decline in health or people are diagnosed with a catastrophic or chronic illness, or people need advocating in the doctor's office or bedside at the hospital, any kind of transition, coming home from a nursing home, going into a rehab, all of those pivotal points where coordination is so vital. I'm also the author of the book From Crisis to Calm, a patient advocate's take on healthcare coordination for you, the common caregiver. And so, as Michael said, we work a lot with community Medicaid as well, making sure that people get access to their best care through community Medicaid. So I want to talk a little bit about what's going on right now. And Michael talked about it a bit as well. And that is kind of what they're doing during this pandemic. So I'll just go over that briefly. For those that had a recertification of Medicaid between March and June, if the renewal has been extended for a 12-month period, meaning if your Medicaid renewal was going to take place generally in May, you will still receive your Medicaid benefit, and the renewal will be May 2021. So, and it hasn't been elongated as of yet, I've looked. So if you are July or August or any month after June, then the renewal is the same, okay? The other thing that I want to talk about, again, Michael pointed this out a bit, is how they're doing things right now. So if you are applying currently for community Medicaid, you generally have first the state evaluation. And in that state evaluation, they let you know if you are medically approved for community Medicaid. They are doing that right now, as of this morning. They're giving choices of whether it will be telephonically or utilizing Zoom or some other kind of application so that they can see. So that's what's happening on that end. And the MLTCs that I've worked with are only using Zoom or some other kind of platform so that they can see. And it's been an effective measure. Everybody is safe. I'm able to effectively advocate, and everybody gets their information. So just to let you know how it's going on right now. So as Michael had mentioned, there's new things happening. And I think what's really important to note is that, well, these things could start happening in October. Most people, to be financially eligible, and again, this is for New York only. That's how Medicaid runs. It goes state by state. but I just saw that pop up. So these are planning on taking place in October. It may be pushed back. But right now, I'm going to start and end with this thought that if you are on the fence or thinking about community Medicaid, now is the time. Now is the time to plan. Now is the time to apply. It's time to get off the fence and really take action. Okay, so after one has gone through the hurdle and victory of being approved financially for Medicaid, there comes the medical eligibility. And as many of you may know, it's been getting harder and harder for people on their own to get their care needs met or their home care needs met. And so an advocate is always helpful, but now things are changing. So let me just talk about ADLs. So activities of daily living. Let me just describe them. So we have ambulating walking, which is walking or getting around, dressing, toileting, eating, bathing, transferring, which is getting up from a sitting position or sitting down from a standing position, as well as turning and positioning in bed. So those are the general ADLs. Perhaps they will include, because this is not known yet, will include medication management, preparation of meals, routine skin care, and changing of simple dressings. We're not quite sure. And I tell you about these because ADLs has a lot to do with being approved medically for community Medicaid. So to be eligible with these new changes taking place in October, you need to require physical maneuvering with at least 3 of those ADLs I mentioned. Okay, so physically maneuvering means you have to have a person physically assist you. Again, I will make the example of a walker. So if dad uses a walker and he gets around just fine utilizing his walker, that's not physical maneuvering. If dad, however, has trouble utilizing his walker and needs some hands-on assistance moving around, that would be physical maneuvering. Okay, so that would count as an ADL. Now, for those with a diagnosis of dementia, to be medically eligible for community Medicaid, it has to be 2 ADLs that require, at the minimum, supervision. So what does that mean? Supervision, for example, I'll use again, mom with a walker. So mom could utilize a walker, but needs to be supervised because potentially she forgets how to use it effectively. And so she has to be told and supervised, or she will attempt to go places that a walker couldn't go. So she needs to be supervised, okay? So for those that have a diagnosis of dementia, it's at least 2 ADLs that require supervision. For those without a diagnosis of dementia, it's at least 3 ADLs that require physical maneuvering, okay? So the other thing is when we described community Medicaid, a lot of what we think about is care in the home. Sometimes that comes in the form of a home health aide from a licensed agency. And sometimes that comes from a loved one providing us care at the home. That's not from an agency. There's a program currently called CDPAP, which stands for Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program. So this would allow somebody to have, again, a loved one, a neighbor, a friend, provide that assistance in their home via community Medicaid. With these changes, they're not going to be notified, the applicants for community Medicaid will not be notified that there is a CDPAP program. So it still exists, apparently, but they won't be told about it. So without an advocate, they will not be aware of it. Just to give you an example, somebody that may have community Medicaid and they have diabetes and they cannot check their levels, nor can they give themselves injections. Well, a licensed home care agency that provides a home health aide, that aide will not be able to do that. That's not in their purview. So maybe it would be great if their, good friend and neighbor would be able to provide not only that care, but the other care needs. So that's where CDPAP can be really very helpful, as well as obviously for those living in rural areas where there might not be an agency available to provide them a home health aide. So that will not, again, they will not be notified of that CDPAP program. So now I want to talk about the care and the hours, because a lot of people think about that. So currently, Maximus, the state of New York via Maximus comes in and lets you know if you're medically eligible for community Medicaid. Then currently you would select an MLTC, a managed long-term care plan, to come into the home or virtually currently and evaluate. And they would ask the same kinds of questions about medical history and doctors and insurance and challenges with ADLs. And they would also discern the amount of hours you would get per week, per day. So my biggest concern, and those who know me have heard me say this before, my biggest concern is that they are looking at how safely somebody can be in the community. So what that means is I've been effective at advocating for people to get that need it, to get 24 hours of care or split shift, which is 12 hours and then an additional 12 hours by another person because the person doesn't sleep and they need constant care, something like that. So now they are saying, starting in October with the evaluation, they're actually considering whether anyone eligible for over 12 hours can actually live safely in the community. This has me concerned, and many advocates on the policy level as well as applicants, has us concerned because where's the autonomy in that, right? In my experience, I feel that many of my clients would be perfectly safe at home if they get the number of hours they need. And as we all know, we cannot force someone to go into a long-term care facility. And right now, especially now, people are more concerned about that than even traditionally. So the question I have in my mind is, if it is indicated that that person needs more than 12 hours and cannot safely stay at home, and they do not go into a nursing home, does that mean they languish? I don't know. There's a lot of people working on that and trying to figure out these answers and continuing to have the discussions, but it does have me concerned. And there's obviously the Americans with Disability Act that's really considers that discrimination. So we'll see how that goes, and advocates like myself and those that are really ingrained in the policy will be looking at that and working on that. And there's always advocacy that will be done even after these new things come into play, but it is of concern. But we'll be here, Care Answered will be here advocating all along the way. But again, I said I would say it twice, begin your community Medicaid planning now. It takes planning. And if there's a hint that might be needed, but you're a little bit nervous about having someone in the home right now, don't let that delay you. Get it started, and then when you feel safer, when things are changing, and then you want them in the home, then it'll all be done. And you won't have to even worry about advocacy for these new laws. Okay, so I saw a lot of questions popping up, so I'm going to go to them. Let's see. So, let's see. Bear with me a little bit. Everything is jumping.
Nicole, would you like me to read the questions to you?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so first is the question is from Adam. What about somebody who's disabled or impacted as a result of being legally blind or diagnosed with dementia? Do either of these alone medically qualify somebody for Medicaid without other ADL requirements?
For community Medicaid, as far as I can see now, it would require somebody, I mean, if I was making the rules, it would be pretty obvious, right? But it has to require at least supervision for 2 of those ADLs. So on the face of it, I would say yes, because they're going to need supervision with at least 2 of those ADLs, but you'd still have to go through the process.
Okay. Bethany asks, I thought that eMed-NY stops paying for CDPAP.
I don't know if that's a specific agency. So CDPAP, as it runs now, it goes through there's still a fiduciary responsibility of an agency that makes sure that the aid, even if they are a loved one, gets paid through community Medicaid. So I'm not sure if that's one of those entities, but CDPAP is still alive and well.
Right. Okay, so Donna says, I work in hospice. How does this work for clients who want to remain in their own home to die?
Okay, that is a great question. I've had clients that were both receiving community Medicaid and going on hospice. There was a lot of back and forth with that, but I believe as of right now, and don't quote me on this because every time they say it, I generally have to advocate for it either way, but it should not preclude you from being on hospice or vice versa, because hospice is one thing and community Medicaid is the other. There's always, I don't know, in my experience, there's always been this back and forth. Is that double dipping? It isn't, but that doesn't mean you don't have to advocate for it. So as far as community Medicaid is concerned, the rules are those rules. Hospice should still be able to be combined with community Medicaid.
Okay, and that leads us to a question from Joanne. She asked, now somebody else asked a question that just jumped up. Doesn't Medicare pick up most, if not all, of hospice costs?
It can. I've definitely had clients that had hospice Medicare and community Medicaid. And again, it should work, but it's, in my experience, has required some advocacy.
Right, and I think that Medicare would pick up like the medical aspects and provide limited hours with regard to the ADLs, the activities of daily living. That would be Medicaid, correct?
Right. So I think the question goes about when people have home hospice, they often do get hours, although they are quite limited often, through hospice care. So get home health aid within that. So often it's very limited. So that's where the double dipping goes, and that's the concern. But generally you can work it out because the hospice can give either nothing and community Medicaid take it up, or there should be a way to have both.
Right. Laura asks, will Medicaid allow you to use your personal aid or children to be paid through them?
That's what I was referring to, the CDPAP, that's Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program. So if you are able to self-direct, meaning supervise your own care, that's great. You can have your daughter or loved one help care for you as long as it's not your spouse. But that's through CDPAP. That's the program that they're not going to notify people of.
And Donna just made a statement. It's not a question. It's she says, with regard to hospice, Medicare covers it, but only for 20 hours per week. And then, of course, if you don't have Medicaid or hospice HHA, so they can provide, Medicaid can provide a home aid if more help is needed beyond 20 hours, which is usually needed. Okay, so, you know, basically she's saying the same thing that we did, that Medicare will cover some of the services, but not all.
Correct. Correct. And that's a common misnomer, right? People get really scared when they hear hospice, but you can have hospice at home and get some care coverage. I mean, that's another statement, but in combination with community Medicaid, it can be very, very essential for people.
And that's all the questions. Nope, that's it.
All right. So there are a lot more details to this change, these changes that are coming through, right, Michael? And it's going to be changing all the time. We're going to be getting new information all the time because they haven't figured it out themselves, to be perfectly honest. So you can certainly give us a call, and I'll be letting people know any information I come about through through my website and potentially other webinars. But again, start that community Medicaid planning.
Nicole, if I might, I'd like to just add on to something that you said from
Sure.
an attorney's point of view with regard to safety. So there is in the new legislation there, they do talk about whether it'll be safe for the person to be home. And of course, Nicole and I are rightfully skeptical about that and concerned about what it's going to mean for our clients. But from an attorney's perspective, that's where we need advocacy, because you know, the question is, you know, is there no circumstance under which the person can safely remain home, or is it the case that if we have the appropriate services in place, that the person will be safe at home? So, and of course, they're going to do whatever they can to utilize these safety provisions so that they don't have to provide services. But it's our job to point out that, you know, if you provide the services, the person can be safe at home. Now, that's my 2 cents.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Brittany, you said something about an enrollable provider type at this time and therefore not required to be enrolled. Okay, I'm not familiar. If you can see Brittany's information in the chat. Ezra asked something about becoming his mom's aide. No, through CDPAP, you don't have to be certified. You can provide that care in the home without being certified with the consumer directed. However, I get often a question about this. If you are the healthcare proxy or the power of attorney, you can't also be the person who provides services. Meaning, if your loved one cannot direct their own care, you cannot be the supervisor and the provider of the services at the same time. Okay.
Well, there's one more question. If you apply for community assistance Medicaid now and they determine it's not needed, Um, are you, and that's, I'm sorry, the question jumped again. Um, if you apply for Medicaid now and they determine that it's not needed, I assume the application is void. And the answer is, you know, it depends. Well, if you apply for Medicaid and you're determined to be financially eligible and you don't need services right now, well, you're not going to get services. But if you were to need them within, let's say, a year or so, then the Medicaid is not voided. It's just that you're not going to get services.
You may have to start the process over again, not the Medicaid, not the financial process, but the
Right.
the medical process.
Mm-hmm.
I've had that happen, actually. Okay. Any other questions coming up?
One question, how can I roll myself to be the aide? Is this, I think this is a New Jersey question.
Oh, in New Jersey, I can't speak
Yeah.
about anything but to New York. It's just not my expertise as far as community Medicaid is concerned. Other things, yes.
Okay, and then we have a statement.
Is that by Wumi?
Okay. Oh, she's telling us about CDPAP home care.
Yeah, please
So-
check out the chats because there's some information that people actually provide that might be very helpful for people. Like by Wumi Green. Okay. So I think that's it. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you found it informative. Again, it is being recorded, so you can find it probably on both of our websites soon. And again, be safe and peaceful and hang in there, everyone. And hope to see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone.
Bye.